Have we been lied to about the link between a high salt diet and high blood pressure? For decades, we've all been told that consuming a diet high in salt leads to hypertension or high blood pressure. And the traditional thinking about this is that you're consuming salt, salt is retaining water, and the retained water is increasing your peripheral vascular resistance, which is increasing your blood pressure. But there is some recent evidence and research that is suggesting that this is not the case and that we have it all wrong and that there's actually another white crystally substance that is to blame. So that's what we're going to dive into in this video today. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Gabriel. I'm the founder of Elite Mobile IV. My background is in ER trauma nursing. So I was doing that for a while, and now I do home infusions. And I like to explore really interesting, fascinating health topics because health is everything you have in life. There's really nothing more beautiful than just being healthy, because when you're healthy, everything else in your life just seems to work. So let's get into what we've recently discovered and share the evidence with you guys. And just a quick disclaimer, none of this is medical advice. I'm not making any recommendations for you, but it's just really interesting research, and I really enjoyed reading this paper, and I want to share the information with you guys. So what is the World Health Organization recommending about sodium intake? Well, the World Health Organization recommends an intake of less than 2,000 milligrams of sodium per day. Now, to put that in perspective, most people consume anywhere from 5 to 6 grams of sodium per day, probably more. And in some countries like India, where it's known to be ridiculously hot, they may be consuming a diet where they're consuming more than 10 grams of sodium per day. So is this 2,000 milligram limit really practical, or is it potentially dangerous? And what the research was suggesting is that salt is not the culprit of high blood pressure. And what they're saying is salt intake may not be an important etiologic factor for hypertension. Salt restriction paradoxically may cause hypertension and cardiovascular events, meaning that salt actually may be leading to high blood pressure if you're not consuming enough of it, and other heart problems too. And that dietary sugar is the more problematic white crystal inducing hypertension, which I feel like is something that most people could kind of naturally draw a conclusion from. If you just consume a lot of sugar, you're going to have high blood pressure. But what the research is suggesting here is that it's not salt that's causing the high blood pressure. It's that people are consuming too much sugar. And we'll kind of talk about like the science behind it, like why that is. So the key findings of this study kind of went into, but we'll talk about it towards the end here. But with doctors and really all these health organizations recommending a restricted sodium intake diet. I mean, you go to the grocery store now and everything is, reduced sodium or sodium free. I mean, what is that doing to your health? Well, here's the dangers of a low sodium diet. If you're somebody who is physically active, or you work outside, or you live somewhere where it's extremely hot like India or some desert anywhere in the world, or you just do any type of exercise any day, which everybody should do some exercise, you're increasing the risk of heat exhaustion tenfold because you don't have sodium in your body to properly hydrate yourself. And I don't know if people realize this or not, but when you sweat out not just water, but you're sweating out a lot of sodium. You could be losing up to 6 grams of sodium per day coupled with your exercise. So sodium is an important electrolyte you have to replace. If you don't replace it, then you can. If it gets dangerously low, you'll have hyponatremia and you'll have a seizure and die, perhaps, or you'll start contracting or getting confused. So you definitely need sodium in your diet. It's not something that you can just cut out of your life. I mean, it's essential to life, to be honest. And what else they're saying is, or what they found is, less than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day can lead to negative sodium balance as well as negative calcium and magnesium balance. So electrolytes, they work hand in hand. So one electrolyte may influence the proportions of another electrolyte. And what happens is when you have low sodium, you're going to throw your magnesium and calcium out of control, which can lead to problems like osteoporosis, hypertension, cardiovascular events, arrhythmias, coronary vasospasm, and sudden death, along with some other things as well. So it's important to have proper electrolyte balance. That's something that can't be understated. And when you're consuming these low salt diets, I mean, you have to really think back to the beginning of time, but humans have developed this evolutionary taste for sodium. Like people crave sodium because it's that important for life. So your body naturally will want to consume sodium. And when you put yourself on a low sodium diet, you're increasing this appetite for it or this craving for it. And what ends up happening is people will gravitate towards processed foods, or yes, they contain sodium, but they also contain other harmful substances, excess calories, added sugars, harmful fats, artificial colors, flavors, preservatives. And that's where you find a lot of the actual health problems stemming from. I mean, the whole purpose of this paper was sodium an innocent bystander, or was it the cause? And what really all the evidence is, landing towards is that sodium is it just got blamed for what everything else was doing. So just a little interesting story. So I was a trauma nurse in the ER, right? And when a patient calls 911 or something like that, they get put in the ambulance or whatever. Like let's say, I don't know, they have chest pain or something. Anyways, they may get a bag of fluids right then and there, like before they even see a doctor, before they even go to the hospital, before they have a chance to tell anybody they have high blood pressure or whatever it may be. They're already giving them a bag of normal saline. And what is normal saline? I mean, they call it fluids, but if you think about it, it's not just fluids. It's salt water. That's what it is. A bag of normal saline has 9 grams of sodium in it. That's what makes it normal saline. If you give somebody just a bag of water, you'll kill them. You can't do that. You have to have like an electrolyte in there or something. You have to have because the osmolarity of it's important. So they put sodium. So 9 grams of sodium they've already gotten before they even see a doctor or say anything. Why? Because the medical system knows that these people need sodium and they feel better when they get it. Perhaps people are even maybe sodium deficient. But anyways, yeah, they've already given them 9 grams of sodium and they pull up to the ER. And then guess what? The doctor may order another bag for them. They may need it. And they have 18 grams of sodium in them. And then you walk through all the rooms in the hospital. What's everybody doing? They got drips going with salt water. That's what it is. They got drips going with salt water, hydrating them. So salt water is hydrating people. It's just very interesting. So, and what's very funny too is that a lot of doctors, if someone has like high blood pressure, maybe some kind of heart problem, they're putting them on this cardiac diet where they can't consume sodium. Like they'll limit it to like at maximum 2,000 grams or 2,000 milligrams, or less. But yeah, they're all dripping salt water. So it doesn't really make sense. So we're kind of talking about the salt appetite. People have been developing this for, at least what they said in the paper here, approximately 100 million years old. So that's just how it is. Like everything goes towards salt. Animals, they look for salt licks. Fish, they live in salty water. That's how important salt is. It even talks about how our pre-human ancestors were likely vegetarians and were opportunistic with meat. But they were even adding salt to their vegetables because salt adds flavor. Why would humans develop a taste for salt? Well, you have bitter vegetables, you add salt to them, now they taste good. Because you need salt. Your body knows it needs salt. So that's why it makes it taste good. And when you're eating a lot of vegetables and, some healthy nuts and whatever, you're actually going to reduce your risk of hypertension. Very interesting. So what else can salt restriction do to? We talked about some of the other stuff, some of the dangers. But one of the craziest findings was that salt restriction can lead to insulin resistance. And it's not something we've talked about on this channel yet before, but insulin resistance is like one of the most prevalent things that's damaging people nowadays. They have too much sugar in their blood, they're becoming insulin resistant, and it leads to a whole world of problems. All right, so that's something that you'd want to avoid. So many physicians around the world are asking people to restrict their salt intake, being totally unaware of the potential consequences or the unintended consequences of doing so. They found that salt restriction increases insulin and C-peptide levels, which can worsen insulin resistance. It was also observed that a high salt diet stimulates insulin-independent glucose uptake without interfering with insulin sensitivity. So a high salt diet was actually reducing insulin resistance. And a and a high salt diet can induce protection from harmful effects of a high diet in sugar, which is likely primarily dietary culprit behind obesity, atherosclerosis, and subsequently hypertension. So they even found in the study that consuming a diet high in salt was counteracting the effects of sugar. And yet we have all these doctors telling people to avoid sodium. But I've never heard a doctor in the hospital tell people to avoid sugar. They're always saying avoid sodium. I've never heard them avoid sugar. In fact, it was so easy to get sugar in the hospital. That's all they served there. So here's another question. Does high salt cause fluid overload? No. I mean, this study, it didn't find that at all. It actually found that overconsumption of added sugars can lead to fluid and salt overload, but not the sodium itself. Now, why is that? And it's because sodium is rapidly excreted by the kidneys. So if you intake a lot of salt and you have too much of it, your body's just going to start eliminating that salt. What they found is that most patients with essential hypertension have normal blood volume and body sodium, but an increase in peripheral vascular resistance. So these patients who they're restricting salt on, or who have hypertension, their blood volume is fine. Like there's not too much things pushing against their vein in there. Like the fluid volume is fine, and the sodium is fine too. Their serum sodium is fine, but they still have this peripheral resistance, which is what's causing the high blood pressure. And what's interesting is that normal salt intake may actually improve your peripheral vascular resistance. So if you have normal salt intake during the day, you're actually reducing your risk of hypertension because it helps prevent that peripheral or too much peripheral vascular resistance. So what's the real concern here? I mean, all the evidence is leading towards that. The real concern isn't necessarily a diet high in sodium, but rather a diet high in sugar. If you're eating too much sugar, you're going to cause high blood pressure. But with sodium, they weren't finding that. They were finding that people who were eating sodium were not increasing their blood pressure at all. So what they said is, in fact, abnormal glucose homeostasis and elevated serum glucose levels, generally from decades of consuming diets high in added sugars and other refined carbohydrates, are one of the most pressing public health concerns worldwide. So eating sugar is the most pressing health concern worldwide, which makes a lot of sense. You know, it makes a lot of sense. Chronically elevated glucose levels can lead to an increase in inflow of water from tissue cells to the intravascular space, leading to an increase in intravascular volume, which, if not compensated for, may lead to hypertension. So, you know, with salt, they say that it causes the fluid retention because salt attracts water. Glucose is the same thing. It's another one of those molecules that attracts water because it's a particulate. Another thing with sugar is that sugar consumption actually reduces your nitric oxide levels, and nitric oxide is what helps reduce the peripheral vascular resistance. So when you're eating sugar and you're reducing your nitric oxide, you're increasing your blood pressure. And what they said here is perhaps the best evidence comes from a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials that showed that a diet high in sugar as compared with a low diet sugar for just a few weeks caused an increase in blood pressure of approximately 7.6 systolic and 6.1 diastolic. So they found that there was a study and it showed that they ate more sugar and their blood pressure increased. But with salt, they couldn't replicate it. Very, very interesting. So we did talk about this part. Increasing salt intake in individuals with normal kidney function usually does not increase arterial pressure because the kidneys rapidly eliminate the excess salt and blood volume is hardly altered. So we touched on that, but yeah, your kidneys, they get rid of the sodium. Like if you have normal kidney function, you're going to excrete the excess sodium and you're not going to change your blood pressure. Studies showed that increasing salt intake to 10 to 20 grams daily did not increase blood pressure in patients. I mean, that's it right there. I mean, they increased their salt consumption by 5 times the recommended limit and no one's blood pressure changed. Very, very interesting. And yet they blamed the high salt diet for extracellular fluid retention, but studies failed to show that patients with hypertension have an increase in extracellular fluid. So the studies didn't show that they were retaining any fluid because of sodium. And a high salt diet did not seem to result in over retention of water. So people just naturally consuming a lot of salt, they weren't holding on to any water. So when looking at all this evidence, I mean, just at this recent research and stuff, it's showing that sodium consumption is not really the main concern. I mean, you go to the hospital, and like I said, everyone's dripping salt water. People are eating salt in their diet, but the real problem is not the sodium. Like one of the most important electrolytes that is so necessary to survival. Without it, you would die. And going all the way back to ancient times, it was so necessary to survival that people would trade it as currency. I mean, we're talking about an electrolyte that even animals in their natural state will seek out and go find, and they'll lick it right off the ground. Deers are looking for salt licks everywhere. When hunters want to hunt deer or game or whatever, they throw out salt licks. Or farmers who want to take care of their cows, they'll throw out salt onto the field so their cows can lick the salt. But I don't hear about doctors or anybody really trying to limit the salt intake of cows. No one seems to be worried about their blood pressure. And it's because, there's overwhelming evidence suggesting that sodium is not the problem, that sodium is actually healthy for you. But in fact, sugar is a problem. And we've seemed to blame salt because, you find sodium in a lot of things that, in all the processed foods, really. It's in all the processed foods. But the processed foods, they have high sugar, high harmful fats. They're, overly heated and nutritionally dead. So we have to learn how to, I mean, obviously you do what you want for yourself, right? But it's just showing that sodium is not the problem. You shouldn't be fearful of sodium. It's not something you need to try and restrict in your diet. Going on a low sodium diet isn't going to improve your health, according to this. So if your doctor's like, go on low sodium diet because you need to lower your health or whatever, just get a second opinion. Okay? I'm not trying to contradict your doctor. I'm not your doctor. But, the research is just showing that going on a low sodium diet is not going to improve your health. What you really need to be doing is avoiding sugar, avoiding processed foods, avoiding harmful fats, avoiding environmental toxins. Just stay healthy. Really, just think about staying healthy and don't worry about sodium. So if you found this video helpful, do me a big favor, smash that like button, comment below what you think about this. I got a lot of flack on TikTok when I posted a little video on this, so I wanted to bring up the paper and just see, just kind of go a little bit more in depth into it because you can't really explain everything in a short little video. And share this video with people, guys. Let's get the word out there. No one's really talking about the whole sodium thing. I mean, it's crazy. You'll put someone on a low sodium diet, but you won't tell them to stop eating sugar. Or exercise even, right? And everyone in the hospital is dripping sodium. When the first thing they do is give you 9 grams of sodium. I mean, it's crazy world, guys. So share the video with somebody who needs to hear this, and let me know if you have any ideas for future videos. So appreciate all of y'all watching. It's Gabriel from Elite Mobile IV, and I will see you all in the next video.